Ladies and gentlemen, it is now 6:46 and a quorum of members is present, so the meeting of the Board of Education of the School District of New Berlin is called to order. Please call the roll.
Ms. Crosby.
Here.
Mr. Helmer.
Here.
Mr. Kurth.
Here.
Ms. Scholes.
Here.
Mr. Seidel.
Here.
Ms. Unger.
Here.
Ms. Wondercheck.
Here.
I would entertain a motion to recess to closed session.
Madam President, I move to recess into closed session pursuant to Section 19.851 C, E, and F of the Wisconsin statutes to consider A, the approval of closed session minutes of May 24th, B, the employment, performance, and compensation matters pertaining to staff, and that's it. Second.
So I have a motion by Mr. Kurth and a second by Mr. Helmer. Please call the roll.
Mr. Kurth.
Yes.
Mr. Helmer.
Yes.
Ms. Crosby.
Yes.
Ms. Scholes.
Yes.
Mr. Seidel.
Yes.
Ms. Unger.
Yes.
Ms. Wondercheck.
Yes.
We are moving into closed session and will return to open session around 7 o'clock. we got a minute. Yeah, maybe not. It is now 7 o'clock, and we are returning from closed session into open. Of the serious and important nature of our efforts here, we will join in the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. For all who are able, please rise. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now, for those who wish to prepare for the meeting, we will have a moment of silence. This is a public meeting of the Board of Education. Prior to this meeting, notice was given to the public last Friday by providing the agenda to the City Library. The agenda was also posted on the district website. A copy of the agenda was forwarded to the Journal-Sentinel, the Waukesha Freeman, and the Waukesha Now, all of which have filed requests for all public notices. And we'll begin with privilege of the floor. Meetings of the board are conducted for the purpose of carrying on the business of the schools and therefore are not public meetings, but meetings held in public. This portion of the meeting is to be an opportunity for you to come and voice your concerns to the board. So please do not be offended when we quietly listen. We may even take notes. We do not immediately respond to your questions and comments. This is a time for you to talk and us to listen. Thank you for coming to voice your comments and concerns. When I call your name, please step up to the microphone, address the chair, and state your name and whether or not you are a resident in the school district. Each presentation is to be restricted to a maximum of 3 minutes. Privilege of the floor will be limited to 1/2 hour. Presentations are not to be designed for purposes of engaging others in a debate in this forum. Discussion of certified, classified, or professional personnel or of individual Board of Education members shall not be considered an appropriate topic for this forum, and the speaker will be ruled out of order. Okay. First up, we have Leah Demmel.
Sometimes she likes to sit with her sister. Okay. Dear School Board and Superintendent, I'm a resident of New Berlin and have 2 children attending the elementary schools. I wanted to ask the board to consider 2 things today: reducing COVID mitigation guidelines and curriculum transparency for the 2021-22 school year. For a year and a half, the children and teens in our district have missed numerous opportunities and life events. Many parents want to get things back to normal. Not the new normal, but actual normal. My children were blessed to be able to attend school in person, and I am thankful for that. I do believe under the circumstances, you made smart choices. However, there were upsetting moments in our lives like many other families. They seem like small moments, but they are big moments to the kids. I still remember how upset my older daughter was last year when she could not have an in-person DARE program and DARE graduation. This year, my 6th grader missed the anticipated Chicago Museum of Science and Arts field trip. The class saw a magician instead. The annual carnival became a field day with a few activities. And the annual Creek Call, which always consisted of students and their families fundraising, walking, socializing, hot dog meal, and dance afterwards, morphed into a walk through the woods with their class one time during the school day. The chess club that my children were so engaged and excited to be a part of pre-COVID is still virtual. My oldest moved up 2 chess levels in 1 year. She was so happy. But now both my children have absolutely no interest in playing online tournaments and have completely stopped playing. Countless field trips were canceled the last 2 years also. My middle child will be going into 4th grade, and so field trips are pretty much done, and I missed going on some of them with her. I think I also heard the high school junior prom was canceled. These things affect students' mental health, socialization, self-esteem, and engagement with our school. I would like you to consider more COVID rollbacks. For a start, I want the simple things back. I want lunchrooms back without bagged hot lunches. Middle schoolers and high schools to get their lockers back. Volunteers, guests allowed in the buildings. Field trips, no more virtual clubs. Class parties, dances, open houses, relaxed social distancing rules, and plexiglass gone. The second ask is that we have more curriculum transparency. Even though our district has not adopted any radical curriculum, which I thank you for, by the way, there are still instances where teachers are covering controversial topics or assignments on their own. Parents need access to the curriculum beforehand. I also want to know who is picking out the books for the school libraries and reading lists. Please ban CNN 10 in the classrooms. It is a far left biased resource. I also noticed Brain Pop has some controversial topics. I would appreciate anything we can do to make sure our resources support our goals to provide a nonpartisan education. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you. Next is Jeanette Nowak.
Hi, I'm Jeanette Nowak. I'm a New Berlin resident. Good evening, members of the board. I'm just going to get straight to the point, seeing how most of you know why I'm here tonight. I, as well as many other members of the City of New Berlin, are invested stakeholders, are requesting that two policies that are student-focused be implemented for the 2021-2022 school year. These 2 policies are student suicide prevention, intervention, and postvention, and the second is non-discrimination guidelines related to students who are transgender and students non-conforming to gender role stereotypes. The school district of New Berlin is about expecting excellence. This means being a leader, an innovator, and ensuring our policies are aligned to all federal, state, and local laws that protect our students, our children, and not the last in line to adapt to the times. New Berlin is a suburban district with a lot of farmland. There's potential for new development of housing and commercial use. With each year, the city is growing with new young families moving in. As the city has all this potential to attract new families to the area, why not ensure that the school district of New Berlin is actually far more attractive, especially in the public eye and media, versus the other neighboring communities that also have a really solid education but are ahead of the times, which would make them more appealing. Potential families have choices to send to private or public schools. If the school district of New Berlin continues to lack basic policies in place for all students to ensure a safe learning environment, then that could be a reason why families would choose another community to put their children in. Many of the parents today, especially young families, are looking for a safe and inclusive place to live, work, and raise their families. Why not let them know that the New Berlin is open to families' inclusiveness and diversity in the school district? No one is debating that the school district of New Berlin is not great, and congrats on being a top ranked among Wisconsin schools. However, let's do better by ensuring that all our students are learning in an environment that is safe for them, so that they don't have to worry about being afraid to come to school or bullied, harassed because of trauma they're experiencing, or their social emotional needs are not being met. And they're not sitting at their desk having thoughts like, is that person looking at me? What will they say on social media about me? Will that teacher even notice my body language? Will they notice that I seem off? Will they call me by my correct pronoun? And will I be told that I can't use the bathroom that aligns with my identity? During tonight's discussion about board policies, I hope that these 2 policies will be discussed, and questions such as, well, why don't we already have these policies in place? Why does the student parent handbook or district website not mention anything about these 2 policies and safeguards for their needs? Why are there not supports in the handbook and district website made available for parents and students, especially about student suicide? And what barriers do we need to address to overcome to make these effective? And what harm could happen to our students if we don't have these policies in place? Thank you.
Thank you. Angela Spielman? I'm just getting lucky.
Hi, guys. Thank you for your time tonight. My name is Angela. I'm a resident of New Berlin, and my children actually open enrolled into the Ripon Area School District this year and attended Odyssey Virtual Academy, our Academy of Virtual Learning. Due just to all the regulations and the restrictions for COVID, so we chose to go a different route with our virtual. But previously, they have attended New Berlin schools. My children have expressed the interest in returning to the classroom next fall, mainly because they miss their friends and they miss the social aspects of school. But my job as their mom is obviously to protect them to the best of my ability, and I have a lot of reservations about sending them back. So here are my main concerns. Middle and high school students need to have access to their lockers again. I recently learned that that was not a thing this year, and that's absurd, because I actually know several middle schoolers who are not much bigger than a backpack, so the fact that they had to carry that around with them all day is concerning. So this is non-negotiable for me because my son will actually be in middle school next year. Another non-negotiable is parent volunteers being back into the school. I was heavily involved at Ronald Reagan in the past and enjoyed helping in the classroom, doing class parties, going on field trips, all of those things that little children look forward to their parents being a part of, and fun things like bring your parent to PE day. And then just getting to know the teachers and have a relationship with them, pop in with a Starbucks. I enjoy forming those relationships. So if I can't be in the schools, that's also non-negotiable. My children will not be going back to New Berlin schools. And then finally, just to kind of reiterate what Leah said about curriculum transparency, there's a lot of concerning topics being taught in schools around the country, and if I can't get clear answers from teachers about what my children are consuming in the classroom and what's being taught before it's taught, and that I'm not reacting to an assignment that was already filled out, I need to know beforehand what they're learning. Because like I said, there's a lot of concerning topics being taught to our children, and there's a lot of things that I think parents are responsible for teaching their children and not the schools. So I just don't need biased worldviews being imparted on my children at school. They're there to learn math and reading and writing, and I'm responsible for teaching them the other things. And I know that I'm not alone in those feelings. So I just want to reiterate that it's time to go back to normal. I'm not interested in new normal. Our children need the plexiglass taken down. They need to eat lunch in the cafeteria. They need to go on field trips. They need to have prom and homecoming, and they need their lockers back. So that's just all I ask for next school year so that my children can go back. Thank you.
Thank you. Tanya Tayaki? Tayak. Okay, thank you. Like kayak, I'll remember.
All right.
Thank you.
Tanya Tayak, and yes, I'm a New Berlin resident. So I'm here regarding the COVID mitigation. So we really need to get back to normal. 2 of my 3 children attended in person for the first month, but due to all the restrictions, one being my 7th grader could not carry her backpack all day, not to mention when it got cold, the jacket. She didn't like being separated from her friends so much from lunch. And then my son, too, came back home. Now, my oldest daughter, who had cancer, had stayed home the entire year due to the fact that because she also had brain surgery, she cannot wear a mask. And so she's really looking forward to going back next year for her senior year, and again, without the COVID restrictions. So we'd like to go back to normal. And the other thing, too, is the transparency curriculum. So my 11th grader this year had 3 teachers in her AP English class. One, she left or was discharged. The second one came in, and then they had a third one. Each of these teachers for English had chose to select extremely political, racial, and liberal topics for assignments. Now, this is English. We're not in government. Now, she does have the AP government class. I can understand that. But it would happen all year round. I did reach out to the principal, And the second teacher assigned a topic. Of all the topics you can select to write for English, she said you need to write about transgender. Don't understand why, but that's what was assigned. Many parents were angry. Now, I'm all about, everybody's rights. I have a sister who's, she's married to a woman, so I get it. But there's certain things that need to be taught at home and certain things that need to be taught in school, like science and history and reading and math. Let's stick to those basic subjects and let the parents do their job in terms of morals and ethics and things like that. Her third teacher, and I was told by the principal that, we found the replacement. He's coming from New Burlington. He taught the same AP English class, and I promise you won't have issues. Well, he gave them an assignment, and he did like a summary of what he wanted them to do. And the summary was on the eulogy for Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher, and how he didn't agree with her speech. He didn't agree with Ronald Reagan's politics. And then he also said that in terms of what was then and what he did was not good for the country. So, and I'd heard this from my daughter as well as many other students were complaining, or parents were complaining on Facebook. So again, reached out to the principal. And again, I can understand if this was in our AP government class, but we're in English, and there's hundreds, if not thousands, of other topics that children can learn and write about. Let's leave the politics and all the discrimination issues out of the classroom. I feel that New Berlin schools are safe. We moved here 15 years ago because of New Berlin. It's a highly respected school district. People want to continue to move here, so let's just get back to normal and keep that out of the classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you. Next is the president's message, and I just want to take this moment to congratulate all of our graduates. On Friday, we had our New Berlin West graduation, and I accepted that class. And then on Saturday, it was New Berlin Eisenhower, and Amy Crosby was there to accept that class. And we just really wish all of our graduates well and best of luck in their future endeavors. Then we have the administrative team report.
Yeah, I would echo those sentiments, Janet. We had, obviously, COVID once again. There were some things that were different as a result of it. Certainly our goal for next year's graduations would be to get back to as normal as possible, hoping that, the circumstances are going to be much different at that time. And I do know that things, changed considerably related to the pandemic here and some of the choices that were made. And I think, I just want to thank our staff who did a tremendous job of preparing for the changes, the nuances that were occurring throughout. And again, I think the culminating event was really an awesome event. Again, not only as I'm a proud superintendent, but like Janet and Amy, a proud parent of a graduate of the School District of New Berlin. So again, congratulations to all of our graduates. And again, I just want to recognize that, sometimes we forget, or we have to remind ourselves that it's great that they have their high school teachers there that are typically present, but our elementary staff do an incredible job of preparing our students for middle and high school. And so it's really just a culminating event for all of our staff to appreciate the work that goes in. I also did send, we typically get together as an entire district staff, usually the last day of school. We didn't do that again this year. What we did do was we sent out a video, which maybe, Diana, we can send a link to the board, basically congratulating our 5-year anniversaries for staff. We had 2 staff members, one including Jeff Bradley, who is sitting over here, and Dan Ailes. Dan, you've been here 10 years? I hate to overshadow that 10 years with Jeff Bradley's 40 years, but we did have 2 individuals, Rick Fernicki and Jeff Bradley, had their 40-year anniversary. So we recognize every 5, 10, 15, 20, 25, and so on. And then we also recognized our retirees, which we had several this year. And then that was followed up by some really interesting and very encouraging words from our kindergartners on how our staff should enjoy their summer. So I know that was posted on the district Facebook page, but maybe we can send that advice along, and maybe you can heed some of that advice yourselves. And then I did want to just mention that similar to, again, things that occurred last fall, we are going to be accepting international students for the upcoming school year. We did take a hiatus for last year, just kind of given the circumstances, but we are going back to allowing international students. I know Mitch had asked, what is the typical amount of students? It usually doesn't exceed 2 per high school. And it's a pretty rigorous process for an individual student to be able to kind of go through the process through these exchange programs. So by the time they actually come to us, they've already gone through that gamut of applications. So I don't want to get into the specifics of prior commentary because it's student confidentiality issues, but again, just want to recognize the fact that we are going to go back to accepting international students come this fall. Thank you.
Thank you. Then is the consent agenda as the next item, which includes the notice, approval of minutes of May 24th, the WIAA 2021-22 membership renewals, 2021-22 interdistrict agreement, chapter 220 with MPS. Do any of those need to be pulled out for separate consideration?
I just want to clarify that those 2 specific items are annual renewals.
Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented. Second.
I have a motion by Mr. Kurth and a second by Mr. Halmer. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? Motion passes. On to the regular agenda. First up is committee updates from the Personnel Committee first.
We had a personnel committee meeting last Monday. The primary reason for our meeting was to get a demo from WASB, which is the Wisconsin Association of School Boards, on their superintendent evaluation tool. Louise from WASB walked us through their tool, kind of high level. It's really more of a rubric than an actual tool. So the committee agreed that it really wasn't any simpler than what we have. And because there's cost involved, we're thinking instead we'd rather just revise our tool. So we're going to be having another committee meeting sometime in July to kind of put our brains together and come up with a proposal to share with you guys. Basically, we're thinking we're going to change kind of the beginning part that's like all of the things the superintendent does. It's just really overwhelming for us to do every year, and kind of pare that down to some key points, and then we'll keep going with goals and things. And we may look at also adjusting the timing of those reviews. So we will have more information for you guys soon, later this summer. We also had talked a little bit about employment services update, which is Nicole is going to run through today. We got an update on the health benefits consultant, which basically Patrick and Nicole let us know they have it down to 2 finalists, so we will be getting a final recommendation from them at our August 30th meeting. We looked at the policy 4108 on harassment and did kind of do some reviews of the NIOLA, and then there were related policies, so that's kind of paused for now. We'll look at that again on August 30th and then bring it to you guys for a first read. And then we did have a discussion on the date. So we were going to meet in September, but because the first Monday in September is Labor Day, we're going to meet on August 30th. So then the update that's in the board docs also includes our future agenda topics if you guys are interested in that. Any questions?
If there's no questions, then we'll move on to the finance report.
All right, well, we had our Finance Committee meeting on May 24th, and all members were present. We started out with kind of adjusting our goals. Goal 1 was review all monthly financial reports and pose questions to the district's chief financial officer, whether from individual committee members or the public. In speaking with Patrick, we decided that by 9 a.m. on Friday before the Finance Committee meeting, along with how are we doing according to the budget. Goal 2 would stay as is, review, revise where necessary all current financial policies of the district and propose changes, additions, and deletions to the full board. 3 used to read increase overall financial transparency to the district. We changed increase to maintain financial transparency. 4 is obviously provide quarterly updates to the full Board of Education on the progress of the committee. And we added a 5th one is to review the financial report before the annual meeting. As of right now, we're going to keep our meeting the 4th Monday of the month at the same time, which I believe was 6 p.m. or was it 5:30? 5:30. As far as policies, 5135 is going to be our first task at the June 2021 meeting. That's discussing student fees, fines, and charges. And then we'll move forward to 1324 and the Title I services as well in an upcoming meetings. So we don't have a date as of right now on that. So, and if Chrislyn or Amy want to add anything, that's kind of what we had discussed at the meeting, correct? Okay. That ends my report.
Thank you. Any questions? All right. Then we will move on to right. Unfortunately, I actually said regular agenda too soon. We were on committee updates. Now we're on the regular agenda. So yes, this is for first read of the 2021-2022 preliminary budget and 3-year forecast.
I will immediately hand it over to Patrick Miller.
Thanks, Joe. It's my pleasure to present to the board tonight the first draft of the 21-22 preliminary budget. The budget packet, in the budget packet, there's a booklet that goes along with this budget, and I think it's important to note what the preliminary budget is. The first statement in that booklet indicates that the preliminary budget is a technical document. What is sometimes difficult for boards and especially the public to understand is in the school district budget, we are not really going to know all of the components that go into building the budget from a revenue standpoint until the end of October. So we're going to be well into the school year before we really have all the details that we need in order to put a solid initial budget together. For that reason, a preliminary budget is necessary to present to the board for their approval in order for the district to be able to conduct business on the 1st of July, which is the first day of the new fiscal year. And as you can imagine, those months leading up to the beginning of the school year, there's quite a bit of activity that happens to prepare for the next school year. So this is a technical document that allows us to conduct business. There are 6 funds that are explained in the preliminary budget. There are 2 additional funds that I don't include in the preliminary budget. Those are funds 21 and 60. We call those fiduciary funds. There are monies in there, but the budgets for those particular funds are simply, we budget what is a balance in those funds for expenses in the upcoming year. Those are places where we collect gifts and donations and fundraising activities from students. So those are fiduciary funds. We really don't have a typical budget activity. So what follows is the activity for those other 6 funds in the preliminary budget. The assumptions that we use, sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. In general, we have these assumptions for you. If you recall last year, we had a very large increase in our state aid. I believe I described it as the perfect storm, where we had increased fund balance, we had an increase in our 3-year rolling average, and we had increased property values from the prior year. All of those things together resulted in an enormous increase in our state aid. And if you remember back at that point in time, I also said, don't expect this to happen. Actually expect this to reverse itself in the coming years, because we are a negative tertiary district. So we are planning on a 15% reduction in general state aid. We are projecting a 2.23 increase in property taxes as a result of that lost state aid. We're in the difficult time in the state of developing a biennial budget. This is a tough thing for the legislature and the governor to do every 2 years. And one of the biggest things that gets batted around is the support of K-12 public education. And so every 2 years, we have a lot of moving pieces going into budget planning. The other year tends to be a little bit easier because we have a good idea of what we can expect for revenue. But we are in that first planning phase of the next biennial budget. So what you're going to see here are a lot of assumptions, and because of the pandemic, because of influxes of federal dollars, and because of some above anticipated or expected revenues in the state, there are just seem to be a lot more moving pieces going into this budget. So in this particular graph, I'd like to just highlight, the local and state sources are our two largest sources for income, but by far the local support for our revenues is the highest, almost 77%. That comes in the form of property taxes, sales of old equipment, gifts or gate sales, investment activities and whatnot. So when you think of local sources, it's not just property taxes. There are other things anything that is considered a local revenue. So when you pay that, I don't know, $5 to go watch a football game, that's part of our local revenues. I'm not going to read all of this to you, but just a couple of highlights. We are looking at slight expense increases in the general fund, due in part to increases in staff wages, increases in health costs per the recommendation of our health counsel or consultant. Technology, there are some larger technology infrastructure improvements, servers, access points, and some fiber extensions. Moving purchases of one-to-one devices from leasing to purchasing. This actually, it's not an increase in expense. It actually saves the district a little bit of money. But one of the things when you're looking at the preliminary budget, look at the variances. Sometimes the variances are coming because of actual increases in costs. For example, in transportation, we have a 13% built-in increase for our student transportation and for athletics. But issues like this one-to-one device purchasing versus leasing, it reduces the expenses in one budget account and increases them in another. So not all of the increases are an increase in expenses, and not all of the decreases are necessarily a budget savings.
In that case, would like the capital budget increase then, and the services would probably decrease or something?
Yeah,
like
it would end up being, there's the leases would come out of debt, and they would go into non-capital. expenses, the and you might, some might ask, how can you have a $295,000 purchase that's non-capital? Technically speaking, because all of those devices individually do not exceed the capitalization amount, they're all considered non-capital. We still do inventories on them as if they were capital objects. We just don't report them in our financials as capital. Another graph to show, again, 60% of our expenses are in salaries and benefits. That actually is a little bit lower than a lot of in all of the districts that I've been in before. We do have little over 20% in purchase services, which represents things like transportation, substitute teachers, second shift cleaners, open enrollment out. Those are some of the largest expenses that come out of purchase services. Our utilities are also in there. Transfers is another larger part of that, almost 10%. And what a transfer is, that's money that we transfer from the general fund into the special education fund for the support of special education services. Speaking of special education, we are not anticipating a reduction in federal support for special education this year, and we are anticipating a 4% increase in state aid. Now, I know that if you've been, reading any of the newspaper articles about the work that the legislature is doing in Madison, that special education support is one of those areas that they are looking at potential increases in. So at this point in time, because we don't have the details of those increases, we're basing it on what we know we're going to get. But understand, this is what the administration does. This is what I do with my finance team, is when we get more information, we implement that information. And as I will say to you every year, you should expect that the annual meeting budget is going to look different from the preliminary budget, because between June and September, we're going to know a lot more about what we can anticipate in revenues, and that will allow us to put together a more detailed budget. Looking at the assumptions under special education revenues, you see almost 63% comes from the general fund, from a transfer. This is another common misconception. People believe that special education services are funded primarily by federal aid and state aid. And in all honesty, the local general fund bears the burden of, I shouldn't call it a burden, my wife would really kick me under the table if she heard that. She's a special education teacher. But they bear the cost of special education. So as you can see, over 60% comes from our local funds. If our state increases, we'll obviously see that percentage go up. Again, I don't anticipate the federal sources for special education funding to increase. Expenditures are much similar to the expenditures from the general fund. Any decreases or increases in state revenue will be adjusted in the future. Here you can see expenditures a little bit more in salaries and benefits. One thing to note, included in purchase services are there's some higher expenses that are that go to help some of the students that we have that have special needs that we are not equipped to handle inside our own school buildings. There are a few students that we have to send to alternative placements in schools that are specifically designed to handle some of the exceptional needs that a few of our students have. Then we'll move into fund balance. At the end of the fiscal year, we are estimating $14 million in general fund balance. And at the end of the 21-22 school year, we're estimating about an $800,000 decrease. If you remember, in March, the board approved $800,000 in fund balance spending toward capital maintenance. And so that's exactly what we are planning. I also would be remiss in my duties as a business manager if I didn't say fund balance, you need to understand, is not like the state rainy day fund. It's not like your savings account. Fund balance in a school district is a one-day snapshot of what the district has in its reserves, and that balance is really only accurate for that day because, for example, if we run a payroll that next day, we spend $800,000 out of that fund balance. That's just the way we have to report fund balance. So it's there for unexpected emergencies. Here I'm not talking about emergencies that would be, insurable, like a flood or a fire or something like that. But if we have a parking lot that needs to have significant work done because of damage after the winter freeze thaw, that would be something we couldn't turn into insurance, and that would be an unexpected expense that could be quite high. Maintenance of our credit rating, which we are a AA2, which is a high grade in Moody's. There are very few districts in the state of Wisconsin that have higher bond ratings. So this is, while we could have, I believe it's a AA1 or a AAA rating, those ratings are very hard to get, and a AA2 is considered by both the bank or the financial institution that our district works with and the financial institution that I used to work with in other districts. A AA2 is a very, very solid rating. So also, we use it to minimize cash flow borrowing. We did not have to cash flow borrow this last year, and we also do not anticipate needing to cash flow borrow this next year. Here's a fund balance percentage from the past. We go back to 2010. Our highest, 30.37%. Our lowest, 14.55%. Right now we are at 23%. Or I should say, I'm sorry, right now we expect to be at 24.9, and at the end of next year, 23.3. Just to mention some of the non-education funds, those would be the non-referendum debt, Fund 38, where the debt for our large capital maintenance projects of the past are located. Food Service Fund, Fund 50, which is, those are dollars that have to be segregated because the food service runs under the USDA program. And then the Community Service Fund, where we provide services to the community, such as the PAC at West, and there are a few other activities that we do throughout the district. For example, managing our facility rentals for community members. Looking at the estimated tax levy impact for 2021, we're looking at property tax levy of $47.7 million. It's a 4.43 increase from 2021. And again, that's based on our anticipated reductions in state aid. At this point in time, we're anticipating an increased equalized property value of 2.07%. That's a 10-year average for New Berlin. And these increases will result in a 19-cent per $1,000 value of, or equalized value on your taxes. So an increase to $8.72 from $8.53, which is approximately $47.50 on a $250,000 home. Again, remember last year we had some significant increases in state aid that caused this increased drop in property taxes. So again, anything that is decided from the state level, even if, for example, if we're given additional dollars, if those dollars come in per pupil categorical aid, it won't impact our tax levy at all. If it comes in revenue limit, it most likely will impact our tax levy, but if they raise the minimum dollar amount for primary aid, that increase could be mitigated a bit. So, and I'm saying all these things to you where some of you are like, why in the world is he talking? There are a lot of tentacles that go into building this budget. So when I say this is a technical process, there's an awful lot that goes into it. And this year, because of the pandemic, because of influxes in federal grant money in different areas, there are even more I should say variables that they just need to be worked out. And unfortunately for me, I'm not the one who has to work them out. Other people have to work them out and then tell me the answers. If it were up to me, I'd have this budget done a couple months ago. Joe would be really happy with that too, so. Sorry about the small print on this, but this is, again, in the packet. This is a estimated tax levy since the 2012-13 school year to the estimated 21-22 school year. Just again to note, the changes to the tax levy could come in a multiple of any one of them of multiple areas this next year, and this all needs to be determined by the state. So I'm still very, and I think everybody should be very happy with the tax rate per $1,000 of equalized value, $8.72, down from a high of $11.42, and $8.72 is a very low tax rate compared to some of the different southeastern Wisconsin districts. So I think the district is doing very well. The last slide that I have was asked to do a budget forecast. So we have here fiscal 22, 23, and 24 is our forecast. 22 and 23 will become clearer as we get closer and closer to a state budget. Fiscal 24 is again going to become a very difficult biennium to predict, because if you think about that, now we're 2 bienniums away. Hopefully there will be no more lingering effects of the pandemic, but yet we will know how we completely rebounded from it. We're going to have a gubernatorial election in there, so we could see the political climate change again completely in Madison. So predicting fiscal 24 and further into the future becomes a very difficult thing to do. Business managers, other business managers in Waukesha County and I meet. We have been meeting weekly. We used to meet every other week, but in the last few weeks, because of the budget with the state, we've been meeting weekly. There are forecasts all over the place, just simply because there's so many variables, so many levers and buttons that we can throw and push. So there's much to be discovered in the future. Just some graphs to kind of show what we're predicting for our fund balance. In fiscal 22, $800,000 in deficit. That was planned by the board. 780 in fiscal '23. Again, that was also planned by the board back in March. Fiscal '24, because of a lot of the unknowns, and fiscal '24 is also when we anticipate the cliff of an influx of federal funds. So for the next 2 years, we are anticipating an influx in federal dollars. Those, it could be anywhere from almost $800,000 to $2 million or 2.4 million. It just, the variability in that is pretty wide and wild, and we're all waiting for the state legislature and the governor to get their budgets done, so that because, believe it or not, they will be determining how those federal dollars are distributed. So again, we don't make the rules, we just wait until they actually establish the rules. And here's what I can tell you, had hours and hours and hours of conversations with the other business managers in southeastern Wisconsin. We are all listening to what's going on with our different legislatures, and we're all talking about what the plans could be depending upon what happens. And I can promise you that whatever they decide, we're going to be ready for it. When they decide, that plan's going to be put into place, and we know what we're going to do. So while it's a bit unknown, we're ready.
Yeah, and just to reiterate the last point that Patrick made related to federal dollars, again, as of right now, we are taking a conservative approach as far as the dollars that we are to receive for ESSER 2 and ESSER 3. We are aggressively working with our legislators to remind them of the inequity that occurred during ESSER 1 when school districts like us were opened, and we received $90,000 in support and relief support, and then had to give away part of that to the local private schools, while the large school districts like Milwaukee, Madison, Green Bay, and so on that were closed received hundreds of millions of dollars. So we are reminding them that that was a major inequity as far as providing relief for COVID-related expenses, and we were penalized for actually the way that it was distributed was based on Title I numbers and not whether you were actually open or not. There is about a 10% opportunity that the state actually, 90% of it is already predetermined by the feds. But it's that 10% that could make us possibly swing from what Patrick mentioned, roughly $800,000 to almost up to $2.4 million. We are demanding that $2.4 million. And so just wanted to let you know that, some of the things that the board has asked as per my evaluation, as far as planning and so on, it's also advocacy for our budget. And we believe that could be a significant swing financially for us. And trust me, we will continue to remind them of what happened during ESSER 1. So thank you with that. Any questions for Patrick or I?
Patrick, on slide 21, so it's 2 back or 1 back from here. Oh, no one can see it from up there either. I think the public misses this a lot of times when we talk about the decrease in state funding we're getting and then the increase in localized funding we're getting. But as a net, we're looking at roughly the same amount of funding for this year as we had last year, correct? About the $54.58 million.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
It's just where the funding is going to come from. And this we're looking at as what I would call as our base revenue.
Okay. I want to make sure that we're not alarming the citizens that we're not going to be, we're looking at decreases in revenue. We're actually looking at a pretty steady picture compared to last year.
Yep. We are predicting an increase in revenue. I would like it to be an increase in revenue that's keeping pace with with inflation, but you know what? I'm happy that we have more dollars with which to do the good work that we do. And you know, I'm happy to have the staff that helps me carve up these extra dollars and make sure that they're doing as much of that good work as possible.
And then with the food budget we have, I know we brought on I've talked to a lot of people from local private schools, and I think we've expanded our lunch program to help support them. And then with all the federal subsidies we're getting and not charging for food, are we actually going to be coming out ahead or where we should be, or are we losing money based on all this stuff going on? Or do you have, not a detailed analysis, but can you just give us a direction of how we're looking for that?
Nope, that's a really great question, and thanks for teeing that up for me. Actually, because of the federal dollars that are being sent to schools in the form of food service support, we're actually coming out ahead. A district receives more funding for a free lunch than they do for a full pay lunch with the additional bump that we get from the federal support for food service or for a reimbursable meal. So we're actually, we're coming out ahead. But if you look in the technical document for this, you'll notice that there are some huge variances in revenue for food service. And again, that is 100% due to the fact that our local revenue is greatly reduced because the lion's share of our revenue is coming from the federal government. That happened this last year, so it was not anticipated when we first put the budget together. It was something that the feds determined to do that later. So that's a huge budget adjustment that we're going to have to do for this year. Next year, we have it planned because they've already told us that they're going to continue that. And when I come to you with this budget next year, anticipate that that's going to flip completely because we'll be losing that federal support and it's going to go back to more of our local support.
Thanks. That's all I got.
No, go ahead.
Oh, okay. All right, I just have a couple quick questions. Patrick, on slide 7, where you've got budget assumptions, you said that the purchase services, I believe you said, the purchase services, the 21.3% in that slide, comprise many different things, including all the open enrollment out of our district. Is that right?
Yeah, that's considered a purchase service.
Okay. Do you know what the number of that carve-out is in terms of open enrollment out? Like, how much do we?
$2.4 million.
Okay. So $2.4 million, do you know what that translates into in terms of how many kids are open enrolling
About
out?
130 kids.
130?
Yeah, roughly.
Okay. And that's basically just keeping the status quo from this past year?
No, actually, we reduced that this last year by the number of seniors that are graduating.
Okay. Okay, so you carried over those numbers, though? You carried over everybody else in all the?
Yes.
Okay, so that's how many we think are going to open and roll out. And then on slide 9, on special education, so if I recall, when they were doing the last budget cycle a couple of years ago, I believe that they wanted the state wanted to hit, or there was a proposal for the state to hit 25% as what, in terms of what they wanted for the reimbursement rate for special ed. I don't know if you remember that or not, but that was what they were, that was what
Yep,
they were.
I lived that one.
What's that?
I lived that, so
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
I remember that.
Right, okay. So my question is, are they talking at all about what the rate is going to be this go round? Have they talked about that? Because special ed is, one of those unfunded mandates we've got, right?
So last year they had it set at 24%, and they're telling us that we should have a 4% increase to 28%.
Okay.
That is one of the areas that the legislature or the Joint Finance Committee has discussed in increases going toward.
Okay.
So it could, their goal is what was talked about a few years ago was 60%
Right.
support.
Right.
And so they're telling us we're gonna be at 28, but there could be more.
Okay, and there seems to be sort of political will for that to move forward, is what you're hearing.
Right now, that seems to be bipartisan support.
Okay, that's good to hear. So, and then Joe, when you were talking about the ESSER 2 and ESSER 3 funds, first of all, thank you for making those arguments, because I think those are relevant and important arguments for the legislators to hear. Are they receptive to that, is my question. I know you're making the arguments, but how has that been received in your conversations?
We are being heard loud and clear.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for doing that.
Dale Kuyenga, who is senator of the school district, happens to also be on the Joint Finance Committee.
Were there other questions?
Yes. I wanted to ask about Fund 41. So I saw it referenced on one of the earlier slides in this presentation. Are we allocating money into Fund 41? How's that going to work for next year?
So that's something that doesn't happen until the annual meeting, but that is something that we did talk about as part of the plan from the March meeting, where we're going to be supporting the work for a capital maintenance out of Fund 41. But that is something, so we're planning for that, but that's something that has to be done at the annual meeting.
Okay, so it's a vote then that has to happen, and are we saying then that the 800,000 for next year is the amount that we're like recommending we put into Fund 41? Is that how it works?
Well, there are going to be some dollars from that we currently use in our regular budget for capital maintenance.
Okay.
We're going to levy that into Fund
Okay.
41, plus that additional $800,000. And we're not really going to be putting that $800,000 of fund balance into Fund 41. That's not legal for us to move that fund balance, but we're gonna levy into that and use the fund balance for our general fund expenses.
Okay.
So.
And then wasn't there also some estimated savings from the refinancing that we were going to try and put into Fund 41 as well over the next?
And that's part of the dollars that we're going to put in there from
the March.
Yeah, from
Those were in there.
the
Okay.
regular capital
Okay.
maintenance. Mhm.
Cool. Thank you.
So we are seeking the board's approval, not tonight, but at the next board meeting. We would ask that if you did have additional questions between now and then, to please let us know, and then we'll be happy to present them to all of you at the next meeting as needed.
Okay, if there's no more questions on that, then we have next the Employment Services update.
So I'd like to welcome up Dr. Nicole Jones, Director of Employment Services, to come up and present the June 2021 report. Our goal per the Personnel Committee is to at least provide a couple different updates to the board. And this is one of two for the incoming school year.
Okay. Tonight's update is going to focus primarily on our staff feedback. We gather feedback from our staff during the spring in two different forms, one being stay interviews, which are one-to-one interviews, and then the other is in the form of a culture survey that goes out to all staff. So I'm going to begin tonight with our stay interviews. These were conducted in the month of March and April. They're one-to-one with myself and with the employee. This year, every year we focus on our teachers, and then we'll pull in certain classified staff members as well. This year, we pulled one new, one veteran, and one special education teacher from every building. Those names are given to me by our principals, and our directors are also able to recommend names should they want us to go talk directly with someone. And then we also requested special education assistants, so our student learning assistants, sometimes our special education assistants, so it's a little bit of mix of those folks as well. So the data that I pulled is, what we do is I kind of comb through the data after conducting the interview with everyone and look for themes. So I went ahead, pulled out the themes. This year I like to switch it up, threw it into some Wordles at the start, because what Wordles do is they pick out the most commonly used phrases and words and make word art with it. Kind of helps you analyze the data a little bit. So we'll start with that. One of the questions that we asked, the first question we ask is, what is the most satisfying aspect of your job? And so you can see right smack in the middle is students, which I love. That's what we want to see when we're talking to our staff members, that they really enjoy working with our students, with our kids. They also love working with their teams, collaborating. They like being here in general. You see, district is another word that really pops there. They love their colleagues, so there are other educators that they're working with. Kind of more bulleted points, more specifically, they cite, again, having great colleagues. These are very common year over year. We see these same themes. Working with our kids, feeling like they make a difference. That came out a lot this year. That the district has high expectations for all of our students and for our staff members. That the leadership is supportive, our community is strong, teachers are given autonomy in terms of the art, not always the content so much, but definitely the art of teaching. We let them kind of test the waters there and try new things. And then our strong hiring, so they feel like we do a really nice job of hiring quality people to work with and work in front of our students. Least satisfying, meetings. Meetings were a big one, and that comes up again year over year. And we do see it very much with our special education teachers, especially. Many of them are expected to be at meetings before and after school, because what we do try to accommodate the schedules of parents as well, and we have to be mindful of that. So it does come up. Meetings can be a burden. Stress, obviously this was a much more interesting year for all of our staff. So again, breaking it down, challenging student behaviors came up, paperwork, documentation, bringing work home every night. So, you know, there's never enough hours in the day. So we're grading at home, we're planning at home, especially at the elementary where they're teaching multiple different subject areas, math, English, science, social studies. There's a lot to plan for. And then again, citing the meetings. A lot of meetings, and oftentimes they're after school, and there's no additional compensation because these are salaried employees. What does the district specifically do well? Again, students really stuck out as being, they love working with our students, love the community that we're in. Wellness, college and career readiness. If I break it down into the bullets, again, hiring quality folks, quality teachers came up again. The professional learning has been going very well, and they were very grateful this year for the additional professional learning days that we afforded them to learn new tools like Canvas and all of the other online learning platforms that we also had to take on this year. Providing the right resources. We do a lot of support and focus on staff wellness, making sure that they're taking care of themselves. They also cited our collaborative efforts, so our professional learning communities, the teams that they work with. Communication has been strong at both the school and the district level, and we'll see that in our staff survey as well. Meeting student needs. Very proud of our college and career readiness efforts, that we do a lot to meet the needs of all different walks of students that we're doing. Some students go off to college, some students go right into the job, into the trades, and we're helping students on whatever path that they're choosing. Career readiness for students, I mentioned, and then again, having strong academics and high expectations for all of our students. Where we can improve. There's, again, never enough time. So we go into, this year especially, and we saw it with our staff, we saw it with our students, social emotional learning, social emotional support is very important, so we need to continue to build on that effort. Managing student behaviors, providing additional prep time for interventionists. This actually is specific to our student learning assistants at the elementary level. They are not planning, but they are delivering some of our interventions in math and reading. So for them, they'd like a little bit more prep time between students because they're kind of going student to student throughout the course of the day. Supporting students in the middle to grow, and then time management for teachers. Our professional learning, they really appreciate our opportunities. We work in wellness into some of our professional learning as well. Getting into kind of the pros and cons list here. So pros, they really like the virtual learning days that we had for staff. So some folks really enjoyed learning virtually this year. Most of our meetings with staff for professional learning were held virtually as a mitigation strategy. Many of them really were positive about the wellness day. We have a wellness day for staff. We provide them with financial, mental health, physical wellness opportunities to attend and learn from. They appreciated that professional learning was applied to the classroom. That's something, whenever they can take something directly back and implement it, that seems to go over very well. And then having voice and choice. On the con side, making sure that resources, this is more specific to our curriculum work. So when we're implementing new curriculum, making sure that everybody has access to the resources to be able to use it right away. Then the flip side, some people love virtual learning. A lot of folks really miss the in-person learning and are really excited to get back to working directly with their colleagues this next school year. And again, trying to continue to make that professional learning more personalized for our different content areas. This is very often the case at the secondary, especially where we have our different content areas wanting to work across district more and more. And then time just to go deeper into the professional learning. How did the district handle the pandemic? So a new question for this year. Overall, really, really positive responses from our staff. They appreciated how we each worked to accommodate our families, whether they were learning virtually, whether they were learning face-to-face. Was it challenging? Absolutely. But they appreciated how accommodating we were. They thought the transparency of the communication went well. Our mitigation strategies were well received. And overall, I think they felt like we did our best to keep them all safe. So then our staff survey was conducted between May 10th and the 17th. So we opened it up for a week. It was divided into a survey for our licensed educators, for our teaching staff, but also opened up a separate survey for our classified staff. So you'll see those numbers kind of broken out as we present here. It's the same survey, very similar survey that we've given year over year, at least 3+ years back, where we've taken the last 3 years. And I do want to make a note. Last year, obviously, last school year was very different in the spring when we gave this survey. Most folks were at home, had been working from home since March, so it was a much different working environment than what we had this year and what we had back in 2019. So as we're pulling out this data and reviewing it, it's pretty important to keep that in mind for the 2020 school year, that was a much different look and feel. So what I did as we're displaying the data is kind of grade it out, because we're not really comparing apples to apples in that case, because it was such a different environment. But overall, what we'll start to see is that in general, the number of positive responses ticked up slightly from 2019 to 2021, and the number of negative responses, the disagrees, dropped also from 2019 to 2021. So we're moving in the right direction, slowly but surely. So in terms of positive culture, we saw a slight uptick there, and definitely fewer disagrees in that case. Positive culture in my school, really positive response from our classified staff in that category. And again, there's where we're seeing, slight dip, but our disagrees did go down slightly as well. So probably more people in the middle on that one. And then having a positive culture overall in the district, that number actually went up pretty significantly in the agree column. Would we like it to be higher? Absolutely. So we'll continue to work on that. Among classified staff, we have a very good solid number going there. And among our disagree column, a really nice dip that we saw in response to that question. Regarding value, I feel valued in my work. Again, it went up slightly from 2019 and dropped slightly in the disagree column. I wish I had classified numbers to show you so you could see a comparison there, but this was the first year that we broke out our classified staff because we had several questions in the teacher survey that weren't relevant to them. So that's why that's broken out that way. Compensated fairly for my work. We did see a dip. This was a very tough year. This is a very challenging year. But we will continue to review our salary as we've done. We did that back in 2020. This year we reviewed all of our pay for our classified staff and made adjustments as needed. So we will continue to review those numbers year over year to make sure that we are competing with our neighbors in terms of compensation for our staff. I'm proud to work in the school district. Slight dip there, but the disagrees also dipped, which is good, moving in the right direction. I would recommend the district. Slight uptick there, and a very solid numbers among our classified staff. A lot fewer disagrees, too. We cut that number in half, so that's great. This is related to our professional learning. So we saw an increase in positivity around our professional learning, again, continuing to work on getting that number higher and higher, and we saw our disagrees go down. Safety and wellness. So feeling safe in there, that went up with our disagrees, and we cut the disagrees almost in half for that, so that's very good. I'm concerned about my mental health and stress. That was a new question for the last 2 years, given the pandemic. So we wanted to kind of capture how the mental health of everyone. Slightly better than last year, which is good. Again, heading in the right direction, but again, there was, it was a tough year. And then our response to the pandemic, similar to what we saw with our stay interview questions, so right in line with that, a fairly positive response to how the district handled the pandemic over the course of the year. And very few people disagreed. Communication, really pleased with these numbers, very solid there. Communication, again, ticking slightly up in 2021. Solid communication at the school level. We're seeing an increase in communication positivity rates at the district level. And then did the district keep us well informed about their decisions? We have nothing that's a new question from last year. So not a whole lot of places to compare that to, but not a bad number either at 73% and 88%. So those are our stay interview responses, our staff survey responses. We will have exit interview data to share with you, but we'll bring that to you in the fall once we've collected all of it. We've started the process, but as we know, things tend to shift and move over the summer. So we'll bring the exit interview data to you in the fall when we're also presenting information and update on our staff resignations and our turnover. So any questions?
I just have one. For the staff survey, do you get building information? I'm just curious, looking at that positive culture in my school question. We did obviously have 2 elementaries with different leaderships, wondering if those buildings played into that.
We can get you that data. We do have it broken out by building as well, and we share that with our principals as part of our data retreat, so they can start to plan for that going into the next school year. But absolutely, if you want to, Joe can probably email that to you. Okay. I'll get it to Joe.
Yeah, and I don't necessarily need to see it. I was just curious if you guys had. I just feel like obviously anytime there's a leadership change, that's going to impact the culture somewhat. So that could also be an explanation as to why we saw a drop in that question when basically all of the other questions seem to go up.
100%.
And Nicole, I just had a quick question. So you said you conducted stay interviews. How many interviews were there for stay interviews, roughly? I don't need the exact number.
Roughly, so if we're talking probably about 5 per building, so is it like 30-ish?
Oh, okay. All right. And is that usually about the amount that you do every year?
Yeah, that's typical.
Okay.
Yeah, that we do every year, because they're pretty time intensive for one.
Yeah.
But we try to do is switch it up with different teachers year over year. We're actually finding, because we've been conducting these now for probably close to 5 years or so, that we're starting to hit on the same people again. So maybe looking at a new strategy going forward, maybe still conducting those, but also maybe adding some focus groups or kind of taking another approach going forward.
Yeah, that sounds great. Thank you.
Anything else? No?
Okay, if there's nothing else, then we'll move on. Next is the revisiting of the board policy review, since we started that at our last meeting, and so we have an update.
Yeah, so I'm really going to skip over the first several slides, mainly because this is what we had discussed at the last meeting. I really want to get to slide 6, which really gets into some of the detail and suggested timeline. What our focus is going to be, just so that the board knows what our cadence is going to be, is that we are going to take, at least as an administrative team, any policies that are not related to a specific committee is the approach that we're going to take the second meeting of every month, is we're going to bring a new group of policies to you. So, basically, we shared, I believe Diana shared a Google Doc with not the full board, or maybe we could, or a spreadsheet?
I could, I think it was originally with the admin team, but.
Yeah, so what we'll do is we'll share that with you so that you know kind of what's happening. We decided to set these up by quarter. So basically what we have for you is what we want for the upcoming quarter as far as policies go. I'm not going to read these to you specifically, but the strategy behind which ones we're going to approach first is that these are things that we want to approach prior to the start of next school year. So they are mainly like the student ones that will impact, basically administrative tasks as we enter into next school year. For example, Ron also did mention that between he and the committee and Patrick, student fees is something that we're going to bring forward before the start of the school year. So that's the approach. And then for the other ones, so that's we said urgent. They're not urgent. We're just prioritizing them this way. Because we are certainly up to date. Some things do need updating, but there's again, we're prioritizing. So again, you have those. Basically, these are the ones we're bringing for you for first read at the next meeting. And to be quite honest with you, we're really going to ask that you please get us, because we're bringing so many to start with, please review them when you can. So that way, literally like the first read, it's like we got everything out there. And so we're not, debating or deliberating and getting into the nuances during that approval time. So we'll really need, your support in really heeding that on the front end so that we can, approve, first read, and then move on again. Again, I'm not going to read this next slide to you. But these are, again, the dates. And then we do have a couple of the finance ones that we had talked about. Now we're talking about bringing some of those, sometime in August. Same with the following. And then for the next quarter, and maybe we could take a quarter off because, this is a lot. And maybe not a quarter, but maybe take a month off for this heavy lifting, getting ready for the start of the school year. Maybe take a month or two off, and then getting right back into the next level of policies that we would like to bring forth. And then, as we've discussed previously, there are some things that could be deleted that could be represented in handbooks instead. I do know that Janet had suggested that we make some tweaks to the website where we have our policies reflected. I do believe that Diana's solidified some things based on Janet's request. I know that we are working on, or not sure if you've already done this, but also having our handbooks highlighted at that policy spot. And if we haven't done that, we'll get to it so that, again, some may wonder where certain things are. In some cases, they're in our handbooks, which are approved by the board. So, again, this is a quarterly approach that we're taking. And then again, we'll need to follow whatever the cadence of each of the committees would like to do. Again, with the finance one, these we would like before the start of the school year. Some of the others, like the personnel, we're pretty much on top of. And then like the finance, the facilities ones, again, for the most part, we're on top of, and there's no real sense of urgency for most of those, quite honestly. So with that, I'd offer any questions, and if there are none, note that this is the direction that we'd like to move forward in.
Thanks, Joe. Two quick questions. One, what's the process going to be? Is Diana going to send out red lines of the kind of basic stuff
Yes.
to us 2 weeks before? So I guess with this one, we should probably have these this week.
Yes,
I'm thinking.
yes, we can do that. And in fact, having you wait until the Wednesday board packet is not going to be enough time.
That's what I was thinking.
So we already have working drafts of all of these, so we can certainly get those to the board ASAP.
Can you send those all in one email just so I'm not digging through 12 policies? And then looking at this quickly, the 3 policies, hazing, anti-harassment, and bullying, are you guys looking at combining those possibly? I'm just thinking they're They're obviously different, but they all fall into that same category.
We are actually, we're actually looking at combining some and separating some.
Okay.
So Neola has some suggested ways to approach it, and I will send that in that detail of how we're recommending getting those out to you. Diana, just note that for tomorrow's ELT though, I want to speak with ELT first before we send those out, because we do have some updates literally as of Friday to some of those before we send them out to the board.
Other questions? I do have a little request. I'm wondering, because we want to make this accessible for the community to be able to see like what is on our agenda coming up, what we're going to be reviewing and revising and approving. Is there a way we could do this outside of board docs so that they don't have to dig through them? I was thinking something more like what was done for the budget task force, where there was an actual page and the documents there, what the task force was doing was all there, so that instead of having to go to board docs, dig and see this document, could we post it somewhere more accessible?
We'll meet as a team tomorrow and discuss that.
Okay.
I think that should be easy enough to do.
All right.
And I think really what we would do is take what's in this presentation and literally break out, by the suggested timeline that we have, which policies will be first read approved, at least for the next quarter.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess a policy page would make sense.
We can do that there.
Right. So then that's a good way then, so they can see if anybody wants to comment on the policies, they'll be able to see this is exactly what policies we're going to be reviewing and what dates we're going to be reviewing. Could we also put up there, I think we already had that document where it showed what we've already done, so then people could also see what we've already, where we're at.
We'll make a note of that as well.
Okay.
We'll make it look pretty for you, Janet.
Just for me. This has been requested by a community member.
Understood.
So it's not totally my idea.
Okay. We'll do it.
I know this wasn't an action item. Last time we had this, it was actually an action item where we were going to like approve your recommendation. So I'm thinking, do we want to put this on the next agenda just to make it official, to say we're approving your recommendation, or is everybody
You
okay
can
with
formally approve it if you want. The only concern I would have with that is I would prefer consensus, because if things shift or change, then I have to come back and say, can you reapprove the change if we miss something or we have to add something? So I'd actually prefer just a general consensus.
Our direction.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, basically, is anybody opposed?
Yeah.
So if not, then I guess administratively, this is the way that we'd like to move forward then.
Okay, if no one objects and wants to do something different. All right, any other questions, comments? All right. Then we have action items discussed in closed session. I have a motion for that.
I move to approve the employee services report as presented.
I have a motion by Ms. Crosby and a second by Mr. Kurth. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed? Motion passes. Then we have future meetings and dates. Board meetings are generally held the second and fourth Monday, beginning at 7:00 p.m. in the Eisenhower Commons, unless noted otherwise. Our next meetings are June 28th and July 26th. Other important events and dates to keep in mind: September 27th, we have our district budget hearing and annual meeting scheduled. So keep that on your calendars, September 27th. And then adjournment. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Madam President, I move to adjourn.
Okay, so I have a motion by Mr. Helmer and a second by Mr. Kurth. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.